Olá malta, sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um episódio, a mais uma semana de React Weekend. Estamos desta vez a gravar um vídeo à noite, são neste preciso momento praticamente quase 5 da manhã e como vocês sabem eu tenho que falar assim baixo e próximo do microfone. Eu poderia usar o microfone dos fones, só que eu tenho que testar como é que fica o áudio por conta da minha respiração. Mas na React Weekend de hoje tanto amanhã, vai ser sobre dois jogos de terror. O de hoje é sobre um vídeo de Resident Evil Most Terrifying Organism Explain Biology of the Mold. Eu vou admitir, eu tenho o Resident Evil Requiem já platinado, pronto para vocês verem, ok? Tenho o Resident Evil 7 por acabar de platinar, só que tem muita conquista. Porém eu já comprei o Resident Evil 2 Remake, o 3 Remake e o 4 Remake, peço desculpa, e ainda comprei o Village, ou seja, ficam aqui avisados que eu estou a pensar em fazer uma pequena alteração. Eu se calhar vou passar Resident Evil para as terças-feiras, mas muito possivelmente não, pelo simples motivo que depois não tinha vídeos de terror para as sextas-feiras 13. Então acho que Resident Evil irá manter-se às sextas-feiras. Mas depois fica a questão Undertale. Mas é agora que me apercebi. Eu queria fazer uma introdução rápida. Eu já estou há 3 minutos e meio a falar. Então já sabem, deixem o vosso like, subscrevam-se e ativem o sininho das notificações para não pararem de receber notificação de quando irá sair o próximo vídeo, pois em 2026, como podem estar a ver, está a sair praticamente vídeos quase todos os dias. Então vamos logo avançar e descobrir a biologia do organismo mais aterrorizante de Resident Evil, chamado The Mold.
A hunter stumbles into a cave. Winter, 1897. Blood from a wolf bite soaks through his coat, black in the darkness, warm against the cold. He needs shelter, just for an hour, just until the bleeding stops. The cave swallows the wind, dark, mostly still, but the air does move, slow, steady, like breath. Breath that isn't his. The pain in his shoulder begins to fade. Good, he thinks, already healing. But healing is not the word for what happens here. Something stirs in the dark. Not a sound, just a shift in the air. It rises from the cave floor in drifting clouds, too fine to see, except when the pale light catches them like dust in a cathedral. Spores. They enter his mouth and nose with each breath. A musty scent, a taste of earth. In his lungs, they sprout. Fungal threads branch through his tissue, sampling his biology, recording the pattern of his DNA. Too fast. His body can't adapt. By morning, black veins will web across his skin. By noon, he won't be breathing. By nightfall, only fungal mass will remain, his outline still pressed against the wall of the cave. A failed integration, one of thousands. The mold keeps what it learns from him, his genetic code, his memories, even the last flicker of thought. All of it filed away in the network below. This is how the mold grows its library, one body at a time.
Ok.
The mold is not the only thing that follows you and
Esta introdução que ele deu foi tão bem feita que prendeu-me e estou ansioso para conhecer.
records you. In our modern age, we've built our own networks, digital ones that
Ok,
Now then, back to the archive.
vamos voltar.
Let us pass from this cave where the hunter met his fate and turn for a moment to what lies above. A village some 800 years old, perhaps more.
Eu ainda não joguei o Resident Evil Village, mas pelo pouco que eu vi do trailer, de quando comprei, esta imagem parece bué Resident Evil Village. Faz-me lembrar
Our
bastante.
vantage above, it seems like little more than a scatter of steep roofs and narrow lanes, the houses pressed together like teeth in a jaw. In most ways, it is a typical village, nestled between jagged peaks that harbor secrets like the morning mists. The rhythm of life is slow here. Births, marriages, harvests, deaths, always followed by the ringing of the church bell. And sometimes, people disappear. Not enough to empty the village, of course, just enough to avoid a true pattern. A hunter who doesn't return, a child who wanders too far, a shepherd whose flock comes home alone. I have watched it all, but you want to understand what happened here. Very well, allow me to pull the proper record. Here.
Ooh.
Resident Evil Incident Report, Village, filed under Bioterrorism subsection.
Espera aí, então isto é a lore do Resident Evil Village? Uau, ok, agora vou ter que estar atento.
Fungal, with total loss stamped in red. You wouldn't know it now, dear traveler, but this town is built over its own grave. Beneath the stone there is a vast network. We have glimpsed it already, but you, like the villagers that live their short lives above it, can have little idea of the vastness of the structure that reaches through the earth like fingers, thirsting for something more substantial than dirt and water. You may be familiar with something like this. In Oregon, Armillaria astoyi spreads beneath the forest for more than 2,300 acres, older than the trees it feeds from. Its threads connect root to root, tree to tree, passing water and sugars in silence. Mycorrhizal networks braid whole forests into a single body, relaying chemical messages the way your nerves carry sensation. That one is perhaps 2,500 years old. What lies beneath this village is older. Where Armillaria trades with trees, this living network catalogs consciousness. For a time, the locals called it the Black God. More modern minds refer to it as the megamycete. In my record, it is simply the mold. It has been here since deep time. It grows here, it feeds here, and it remembers. Let us turn our gaze forward in time. Below us, the days flicker across this valley like candlelight. Now, 2 decades after the hunter found his final resting place, we follow a woman named Miranda. The Spanish flu took her daughter, Eva, just this spring. In the wake
Mother Miranda, ok, isto é a lore.
of that loss, Miranda...
Ok, peço desculpa por ter pausado e ter voltado a pausar. Mas eu espero muito não levar spoilers do que acontece no jogo, mas muito possivelmente vou levar algum. Mas quando ouvi o nome Miranda, lembrei-me do vilão, Mother Miranda.
Miranda grew listless. She stopped tending her garden, stopped speaking to anyone who offered comfort. Several see her slip silently out of the village and along an old mountain path. No one stops her. Even in the fading winter sunlight, they recognize the look of someone seeking an end. She did not stumble into this cave. She came to die. But grief changes the body's chemistry. Cortisol has been flooding Miranda's system for months. Serotonin depleted. Her immune system, exhausted from constant inflammation, has grown quiet. In Miranda, the mold meets no resistance. Spores enter her lungs as they had the hunter. Hyphae begin to spread there, though her body barely notices. Above the cave, the megamycete had been positioned beneath the village cemetery for centuries, poised like an open jaw. That spring, it had acquired a new pattern from a small grave marked Eva. When the hyphae interface with Miranda's hippocampus, the chemical signals they carry include data from that recent acquisition. Miranda's temporal lobe lights up, not her memory, but Eva's. The weight of her mother's hand on her fevered forehead, the taste of honeyed tea forced between cracked lips. Miranda feels the chill of her last sensation now, conveyed through fungal threads like copper wire. The result is not miraculous. The mold stores information. Miranda's infected neurons could read that information, like finding a recording of a voice you thought you'd never hear again. For Miranda, it's enough. She emerges sometime later, the mold having been integrated into her mind. A symbiosis perhaps unique up to this point in history. The Black God has shown her an afterlife, an existence beyond the veil of our reality. A simulacrum of Eva is there, and Miranda will spend the next century trying to bring her back. When Miranda returns from the cave, she carries the black god within her, or so the villagers would later say. They needed mythology to explain what they saw. A woman who entered those caves to die and returned, changed. Prophet, priestess, mother. In truth, she's simply infected. The first human to integrate fully with the mold, a biological accident mistaken for communion. But Miranda embraces their reverence. She touched something vast and ancient. She had heard her daughter's voice in its depths. If they wanted to call it God, let them. Gods demand sacrifice, and she would need many. She begins with what is available. Livestock first, chickens, goats, sheep. Then the isolated, the forgotten, a drunkard from the village outskirts, a traveler who wouldn't be missed. She brings them all before her black god. Most die within days. Their lungs fill with fungal mass, their organs fail. Whatever had allowed her integration eludes the others. She attempts many, many avenues. Controlled exposure, direct injection into cerebrospinal fluid, aerosolized spores at different concentrations. Some subjects transform in hours, others linger for weeks. One shepherd loses language at day 10. A merchant's wife maintains consciousness even as fungal threads wrap around her organs. But the mold follows no pattern she can find. Miranda would need a more precise delivery method, one that could force the integration she had achieved by accident. She would need more subjects. The village had plenty to spare. She loses track of their faces, but then their identity was never important. They had names, to be sure, but Miranda has forgotten them. To her, they are specimens, containers, vessels, one might say. The villagers blur into a single uniform mass of data, revealed only in fragments, painfully, deliberately, one breath at a time. With the benefit of our sight, traveler, we can assemble what she cannot yet. Let us explore what happens. In most cases, as we have seen, infection begins with a microscopic particle. Spores, light enough to hang motionless, enter the body with each breath. At less than 2 microns across, smaller than the spores of Aspergillus, they pass the nasal defenses entirely. In the alveoli, they settle into the warm interface of air and blood. Hyphae sprout from the shells, branching through the delicate alveolar sacs. But where Aspergillus might scar and collapse the tissue, the mold preserves it, creating a living mesh that maintains full respiratory function. In each alveolus, the fungal sheath embraces the epithelial cells, forming junctions similar to those seen in mycorrhizal roots. These interfaces work in 2 directions. Oxygen and carbon dioxide can still cross unimpeded, but now so do small molecular messengers, lipid-derived signals, fungal peptides, even microRNAs. From the lungs, some hyphae drift through the bloodstream while others follow nerve fibers, the vagus, the glossopharyngeal, ascending toward the brainstem. Most infected villagers barely notice. Years of low-dose exposure have bent their immune systems toward tolerance. Their regulatory T cells recognize the mold's proteins as familiar, almost self. But even this tolerance does have limits. Some reject the invasion outright. Fever spikes within hours, lungs spot with lesions, airways close. Others survive but become altered. For those who survive intact, the earliest true changes are behavioral, a tilt of the head as if listening, conversations that lag, words arriving late, subtle indicators of what is happening just beneath their skin. The hyphae themselves navigate by chemical gradient, dopamine, serotonin, glutamate pulling them forward through neural tissue. Each spike of a neurotransmitter creates a trail to follow, drawing them deeper into the brain. Growth generally concentrates in the hippocampus and amygdala, regions for memory and fear. There, the mold's threads settle into synaptic clefts, those microscopic gaps where neurons speak to each other in chemical pulses. They decode the calcium waves of forming memories, the rhythmic release of dopamine, the electrical patterns of recognition. Each signal is absorbed, recorded, and transmitted back through the network. Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, what some call the zombie ant fungus, does something similar in the brains of ants, threading between neurons and releasing compounds that alter behavior. But that fungus only needs its host to climb and die. Simple, efficient, almost merciful. But the megamycete...
Esta é a verdade da formiga, porque eu já tinha ouvido falar por acaso na da formiga.
You see, maps the entire mind. Some infections stop here. The mold may retreat to colonies in the lungs and sinuses and go dormant. waiting. Other times it pushes
Mano, eu estou com um sono. Juro, malta. Depois de um dia de trabalho, muitas das vezes só quero dormir. Eu poderia gravar este vídeo de manhã ou à tarde, como gravei os dois da React Weekend da semana passada. Poderia, mas são vídeos de terror. Quero trazer à noite. Então, eu acho que simplesmente, como eu tinha dito, eu vou acabar de gravar este vídeo. Quero obviamente pedir desculpa por ter parado este vídeo aqui, porque estou com sono, né? Um ser humano também tem o direito de sentir sono, peço desculpa. Mas gravo este vídeo para vocês. Obviamente que para vocês amanhã vai sair o que eu vos tinha dito. Outro vídeo de terror da React Weekend desta semana. Só que eu só devo gravar ele amanhã. Tipo, hoje é terça-feira. Então, peço desculpa por este momento de desabafo e de sono. Mas é.
forward, patient and systematic, toward a more complete integration. Between the 3rd and 10th day, the infection most often enters a deceptive calm. The mold wraps tighter around neural pathways, and small colonies establish in organs. The infected often feel better. Old pains fade, sleep comes easier. They become agreeable, suggestible. Some infections halt here, and the host may live for years with these dormant colonies. Others, however, progress further. By the 2nd week, the mold stops listening and begins to speak. The fungal sheaths around neurons release their own signals now. Ions, neurotransmitter analogs, and peptides. A thought might begin in human tissue and arrive somewhere else, altered in transit. For the infected, fear may disappear. Joy might linger well past its cause. Memories of childhood can feel more real than the present moment. They begin to lose themselves, piece by piece, like lines in a manuscript being erased by some unseen hand. And still the mold's threads continue to work, advancing cell by cell. Some hyphae puncture the nuclear membrane like a syringe, injecting fungal DNA directly into the host's chromosomes. The cell's own ribosomes begin transcribing both human and fungal proteins, hijacked machinery like a retrovirus would do, but somewhat more deliberate. Other times, the mold lyses cells completely, an enzymatic dissolution that leaves only the basement membrane and connective tissue matrix. Into these protein frameworks, it deposits fungal replacements, cells with chitinous walls instead of lipid membranes, hyphal networks instead of cytoskeletons. They perform the same functions, conducting signals, producing hormones, filtering blood, just built from entirely different materials. Over time, whole tissues can be rebuilt this way. Liver lobules, dermis, even the bands of cardiac muscles are quietly replaced, cell by cell, still functioning perfectly, for now. Some replacements are perfect copies, others are chimeras, human cells augmented with DNA scavenged over millennia. The mold threads these foreign genes directly through the nuclear membrane, its hyphae acting like microscopic syringes, injecting alien genetic sequences into human chromosomes. You call it horizontal gene transfer. That's accurate enough, but in truth, it's a library of stolen instructions. Metabolic adaptations from bacteria, structural proteins from arthropods, genes from animals that can sleep through decades.
Parecia que a
Even
formiga
ancient
estava
viral
manca.
fragments, dormant for eons, can now be given new purpose. All very fascinating, but it's not enough, because integration always fails. The mold pushes too hard, or the body rejects it, or the mind fractures under competing signals. Death comes.
Ok, há pouco quando apareceu este frame do jogo, aquela eu não sei, mas parece tipo a Evelyn, tipo digamos, a miúda do Resident Evil 7, só que adolescente,
In days
sei
or
lá.
weeks. Sometimes there is transformation, but never that simple coexistence. Those who survive
Dimitrescu.
longest share certain behaviors before the end. They gather at dawn, sometimes near the church, to stand in silence. Frost gathers on their coats as they stare at the same blank patch of stone, breath drifting upward like incense. The mold itself communicates through molecular signals, peptides that accumulate in the tissue, pheromones that drift between hosts. A single infected person carries these signals at concentrations too low to matter. The mold still threads through their neurons, still records their thoughts, but its influence remains subtle. Background noise, really. But when infected gather, the signal intensifies. Those harmless molecules build to what your scientists call quorum, a threshold concentration that triggers new behavior. Dormant colonies surge to life. Chemical interference in the brain deepens. Individual consciousness doesn't disappear, but fades like grass beneath accumulating snow. Neurotransmitter production synchronizes across every affected body. Stress hormones reach equilibrium, and the same peptides flood each hippocampus simultaneously, triggering identical memories, identical movements. The villagers call these gatherings prayer circles. Miranda believes she orchestrates them. She doesn't. The synchrony comes from simpler rules. The same molecular mathematics that tell bacteria when to bioluminesce, that tells slime molds when to fruit. Just chemistry reaching its threshold, triggering responses encoded in fungal DNA eons ago. Miranda watches all her experiments fail. The Black God demands its tides, and she feeds them to it willingly, but the time stretches into decades. She needs a breakthrough, and then, at last, the answer to her desire for control comes to her, in the simple form of something that already thrives in the village livestock. Let us move forward in time once more. Less than a blink, really, but a lifetime for most of your kind. Miranda's quest at last brings her to a living vector, parasitic nematodes. It makes perfect sense. These organisms already know how to navigate blood vessels, evade immune responses, and establish themselves in specific tissues. Miranda exposes these creatures to concentrated cultures of mold, watching as hyphae invade their bodies, reinforce their cuticles with fungal chitin, and line their digestive tracts with spore-producing cells. She called this amalgamation Kadu, a name which means gift in the old tongue, and it was a gift that she would bestow upon many, willing or not. Each Kadu is a swollen, hand-sized parasite, reshaped by the mold until it no longer resembles its original form at all. Its body is pale and rubbery, threaded through with black veins that pulse.
Parece uma versão pequena do ET.
Faintly. Inside, the Kadu is divided into swollen, translucent segments, each distended with dense reservoirs of mold. Toward the anterior, the tissue is thick and hard. Its surface is ridged and uneven, built to press and hold once inside a living body. To receive Miranda's gift, the villagers had to be opened. The abdomen or the chest, sometimes even the skull, cut wide enough for her parasite to be placed within. Once implanted, the Kadu awakens, sending out pale tendrils that slip between the organs, coil around the nerves, and creep along the spine. Each slow contraction pushes a measured flood of spores into the bloodstream, and establishes fungal colonies before the body can even attempt resistance. Now, Miranda can control the injection site, the parasite's maturity, even pre-treat it with specific genetic templates from the mold's library. The outcomes, however, remain brutal. Most hosts continue to die within hours as the mold spreads too rapidly for adaptation. Many who survive the initial infection undergo profound morphogenesis. Miranda still called them failures. In this case, the mold might disagree. For these individuals, the parasite spreads through tissue like wildfire through dry grass, far too fast for the body's reaction. Within hours, the original template dissolves. What emerges has been built according to older instructions, blueprints the mold has been refining since well before humans walked these mountains. The mold floods every tissue with growth factors, the same ones that build a child in the womb, but now without limit or logic. Muscle fibers split and thicken. Bones lay down new mass so rapidly they sometimes crack under the pressure of their own expansion. Jaws distend, teeth driving roots deep enough to breach the sinuses. Most who make it even this far die during this cascade. Their hearts fail trying to supply the expanding mass. But some endure. The archive refers to these unfortunate souls as lichens. They retain intelligence, enough to recognize their own damnation. They maintain pack hierarchies through calculated violence. They're smart enough to set ambushes, smart enough to know what they've lost. Hunger poisons every thought. Every fragment of human intelligence now serves a single purpose. Perhaps that's why their howls sound so much like screams. Miranda casts them to the ruins beyond the village. They take up residence in an old fort, forming hierarchies through violence and submission. The villagers learn to barricade their homes, to keep livestock penned close, to ignore the howling from the mountains. The village school taught lessons in order of importance: mathematics, Romanian history, and how to properly bar your door at night. That last one wasn't on the official curriculum, but it had the highest pass rate. Children who failed that lesson didn't need to repeat it. The lichens were failed experiments, ultimately, but relatively consistent ones. Some would be altered further, but those experiments are best left to another record.
Parece
Among
lobby.
hundreds of CADU infections, only 4 subjects had shown real promise. In them, the parasite appeared to integrate, not to Miranda's level perhaps, but enough. Each developed unique capabilities: electromagnetic manipulation, pheromone production, cellular plasticity, extreme adaptation to aquatic environments. These became her lords, the descendants of old bloodlines, their genetics carrying some compatibility the mold recognized. Or perhaps it was chance, the right parasite meeting the right host at the right moment of infection. Miranda gave them dominion over the village's regions. Not out of generosity, certainly, but out of practicality. They could manage the human population, maintain order, provide subjects for continued experimentation.
E agora pergunto-me, será que destas 4 CADUs, digamos, diferenciados, a Lady Dimitrescu é uma?
A hierarchy built on infection. The village had become her laboratory, and still no suitable vessel. But the CADU had proven one thing: the mold could be directed, forced into patterns Miranda chose. She begins to imagine what might be possible with perfect control, with a host designed rather than discovered. This idea would travel far from this village. Let us pull back. Below us now, decades compress into moments. Generations rise and fall like wheat in seasonal cycles. The architecture barely changes. Same steep roofs, same narrow lanes, but the people flicker through like shadows. All except for Miranda. She persists unchanged, a fixed point while the village churns around her. The mold has done something to her cellular aging, perhaps triggering constant telomerase production. Her tissues don't degrade. Her DNA doesn't accumulate mutations at the normal rate. Even her neurons, which should never regenerate, maintain themselves decade after decade. The Black God cannot grant immortality, not quite, but a lifespan long enough to watch her experiment's grandchildren become experiments themselves. By the year 2000, she has been refining the CADU for 8 decades. The village is perfectly controlled, every bloodline cataloged, every variation tested. And now, visitors are arriving. Not lost hikers or traveling merchants this time, but scientists. They call themselves the Connections. They offer a trade. Miranda's...
E eu acho que é aqui que esta miúda aqui no meio seja Evelyn.
knowledge for their resources. They want to weaponize what she spent a century perfecting, not to resurrect the dead, but to control the living. Miranda doesn't care about their politics. They offer something she needs: advanced cloning technology, the ability to iterate through variations faster than her crude village laboratory ever could. She gives them samples. They take these gifts across an ocean to laboratories in Louisiana, where humidity hangs at 90% and the temperature almost never drops below freezing. In the bayous, it finds familiar darkness but unfamiliar competition. The Connections modify it further, removing regulatory sequences, increasing cellular replacement velocity. They want rapid infection, total control in days, not months. They succeed too well. Their creation, designated E-001, called Evelyn, carries a strain that does more than integrate with human cells. Far more. In 2017, the tanker transporting Evelyn crashes into the Louisiana bayou, and she escapes. The Baker family find her, take her into their home, and 3 years later, a man named Ethan Winters walks into that same house. From this height, watching time compressed, you can see the pattern. The mold spreads from its mountain source like spores on the wind. Miranda's century of work creates ripples. The Connections, Evelyn, Louisiana, all of it flows toward a single moment: a man dying in a cathedral of rot. His body a sacrifice on an altar of old wood, every cell drinking deeply from the fungal chalice at the moment of death. The Black God performs a miracle. Ethan Winters dies in that house. Ethan Winters walks out of it. I have watched your kind make gods from fear and fungus. I have seen infection mistaken for divinity, villagers whispering prayers, Miranda bending a century toward her altar. all seeking to squeeze the blood of resurrection from something that only remembers. But this one is different. The seeking is the same, that never changes, but the result is not. The record does not end here. Shall we open the next page?
Yes. Então, malta, eu gostei. Eu com certeza irei dar like e dei like. Eu quero muito ver mais vídeos deste canal. Eles têm aqui um vídeo. Onde é que está? Flashcraft, The Disturbing Biology of the Minotaur. Mano, eu estou impressionado. Então, com certeza, irei trazer mais vídeos deste canal. Já sabem, se vocês quiserem assistir aos vídeos que eu costumo trazer para a React Weekend, podem sempre ir à descrição que diz lá o link do vídeo, clicam lá e serão direcionados para o vídeo que eu reagi. Mas então já sabem, deixem o vosso like, subscrevam-se e ativem o sininho das notificações para não pararem de receber notificação de quando irá sair o próximo vídeo, pois em 2026 com certeza vocês não querem perder nenhum vídeo que eu irei lançar. Então, malta, vemo-nos amanhã para mais um vídeo de terror na React Weekend.